Hi, and welcome to another episode of On the Couch. My name's Naomi Verrett. I'm one of the health promotion officers with Caddyshack Project. And today we are absolutely delighted to have Stella Topaz from Abundant Body joining us for this episode. I would like to begin today's session by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which we all meet today. For myself, I am sitting on Yuin country down here on the beautiful south coast of New South Wales. And Caddyshack Project would like to extend our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people online with us this afternoon. As we learn in this space today, may we also take away knowledge, teachings and learnings from those traditional custodians and respect the knowledge that is forever embedded in the custodianship of country. So I would like to welcome Stella. Hi, Stella.
Hi, thanks for having me, Naomi and Caddyshack. I'm coming from Dharawal country on the south coast at Port Kembla. I pay my respects to the traditional owners on this unceded country, beautiful coast, bush, sea, sky, and pay my respects to elders past and present.
Thank you so much, Stella. So just a reminder with everyone joining us today that we all join in different capacities. So you may be joining with your professional hat on, you may be joining with a personal hat on, or indeed you may be joining with both of those hats on. We just ask you to check in with yourself throughout today's session, and if anything doesn't feel right for you, please don't feel like you have to stay in the space. Remove yourself from the space to make yourself safe and reach out if support is needed. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Stella. Stella's been following our work here at Caddyshack Project for quite some time. And after attending some of our webinars and moving on in the professional space last year, Stella had reached out to us to stay on our mailing list, and we're absolutely delighted for that to be the case. And we're very supportive of Stella moving into her own private practice work, which we're going to hear all about today. So once we learn a little bit more about Stella and what she's been doing for over 40 years in the health and community service sector, it was a no-brainer for us to invite Stella to be on the couch. And we were absolutely humbled when she said yes. So thank you so much, Stella. Stella is a sexological bodyworker, an erotic coach and a sex educator with over 40 years experience in healthcare and community work. Stella is a certified sexological bodyworker by the Institute of Somatic Sexology, a facilitator for the Wheel of Consent by the School of Consent, and a graduate of the Urban Tantra Professional Training Program. Stella has completed training and working in vaginismus and is a certified scar tissue remediation educator and management practitioner. So love all of these qualifications in the background, Stella. I'm so excited to be able to get into what these things actually are and what it all means. So sexological bodywork celebrates and strengthens us in who we uniquely are, beyond restrictive binaries that are imposed by roles and structures. Stella will bring her own experiences and gaps of living queer, feminist, white, and female in the world, whilst embracing and loving the body that she is in and the person that she is, taking care to live with compassion, gratitude, and presence to today's conversation. Thank you so much, Stella, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you for reflecting on my work and putting it in those words. That's really lovely to hear that read back to me.
Oh, I just love it. So I guess before we get into parts of your story today and what it is that you're doing, it would be a really good opportunity for us to start just in terms of breaking down some of these terms that we're going to be using throughout today and letting today's audience know a little bit more about sexological bodywork in particular. It's certainly a new term for us here at Caddyshack, and as I guess you will get into, it's quite maybe not a new place of work. It has been around for some time, but is starting to get a little bit more traction and popularity within the community, which is fantastic. So are you able to explain for us the practice of sexological bodywork, please?
Yes. So sexological bodywork is a somatic-based education and coaching practice. And what that means is that people like me working in this field, we're interested in starting with where your body is at rather than where your mind is at. And it can be a combination of education, coaching, sex education, body education, coaching, and it can also involve touch. So one of the things that kind of sets us apart from some other practitioners in the sex education field is we can bring touch and erotic touch into our work to support someone to do the learning about their body. And it also comes from a pleasure angle. So we're looking for how to develop and expand your comfort in your own body and in your sex and your sexuality and in your erotic day-to-day feelings.
It's such an interesting field of work, and I just can't wait to hear more about it and to see what a typical day is like for you. You did mention that it does vary from, say, practices like sexology. And for some of those guests joining us online today, they may be familiar with the webinar or the podcast that we've done previously with Alex from the Pleasure Centre around sexology and her practices. It does sound, as you said, like something very different, and you have just briefly touched on those differences. Are you able to go into that a little bit deeper for us?
Yeah, so I'm not a sexologist in terms of what people might understand about that term. It's usually a qualification that somebody will do through a tertiary institution to be a sexologist. And sexologists are really just studying the study of human sexuality. And they might then move into working as a therapist, working as a researcher, working as a sex educator. But sexology tends to be less about hands-on work with people. And so some people might be a sexological body worker and a sexologist, and others might kind of go into one direction more than the other. The qualification that I have is through an institute that is able to issue certificates to people who do the course. The course takes at least 6 months and sometimes a year, and it involves theory, online work, practice, having people working with people and reporting on that work with their consent. And really, sexological bodywork grew out of the aftermath of the HIV/AIDS epidemic back in the 80s and 90s or earlier. And it really grew out of a time in the US when people were noticing that particularly gay men had kind of pulled back from being able to have intimacy, sex, but even just to touch and have affection because they'd been so devastated by loss and death and the effects of HIV/AIDS. So sexological bodywork sort of came in as a revisiting of how do we get in touch with our own bodies, but also how do we start touching and having intimacy and care and sex with other people.
And I think that just hearing some of those words, touching on some of that, I guess, trauma-informed work, is that very solidly based in what you're doing?
Yes, I mean, I think to be doing any work which involves people's bodies and people's sense of themselves, we need to be trauma-informed. That's a word that it has become used a lot, and I guess the more important thing is for people to want to have the right to check out what a particular therapist is going to offer to them and what their awareness is, what their practice is. It's a conversation between the person and the practitioner around that. But yes, you can't work in this field and not, it wouldn't be right to work in this field and not tend to the presence of trauma in so many people's histories and present.
Yeah, wonderful. And I like how you said it's about matching yourself with the person you're going to be working with, because we know that in a lot of those clinical kind of practices and things that it's sometimes hard to find a match of someone that you really gel with to be able to work with. And particularly when you're addressing such vulnerable, I guess, areas of yourself and your life and your body. So yeah, thanks for reflecting on that. So I would really like to move into hearing a little bit about your background and your story, Stella, where you feel comfortable to share that with us. What's brought you to working in this particular space, as interesting as it is?
It was good to reflect on this. I mean, I've always felt fortunate that I've pretty much felt good in my own body throughout my life, and that I've enjoyed sex and intimacy and touch in my life. So I feel like something happened that conflated my genes and my family and my environment, that I feel like I had quite a good experience of my own sense of body. And I started nursing in my 20, actually when I was 19, 20. So my background is a registered nurse, and I've mostly worked in sexual health, not big on working in hospitals. So I've mostly worked in community settings. Women's health was really where I started out, feminist women's health. And over time, I became more involved in queer health. And, a lot of things changed over the 80s and 90s around language and identity and access to healthcare, less binary models of healthcare. So feminism and queerness have been huge in my development in my practice. I've always touched bodies in my work, whether it was through doing sexual health examinations or other kind of body practices. But I was usually working with bodies that was more about a problem and then a solution. So there was less room for working with kind of pleasure and fulfillment. And then kind of and I came out as a lesbian and then a queer person in the late 80s. And I came out into a pretty stereotyped kind of lesbian separatist world. And it was a while until I actually learned about queerness, about breaking down the binary, about the what was on offer in a world where there wasn't such a separated and binary version of gender and sex and sexuality. And then in about 2014, I went to a couple of weekend courses or week-long courses, which had much more focus on pleasure. Like it was about bodies. It was Urban Tantra with Barbara Carellis. It was a radical ecstasy weekend with Dossie Easton. And I came out of those courses just going, I want to do that as work. Like I loved it for myself. It was liberating and fun. And I was already experiencing parts of the queer and BDSM world privately, but I wanted to bring that into my work. So from there, I went into sexological bodywork. I was working part-time as a nurse when I did that. And I was working in management and policy kind of roles in nursing. And then I did more of the Urban Tantra, and then I did the scar tissue remediation training with Ellen Heed, and working with vaginismus. So just sort of looking at a few specifics as well as this overall sexological bodywork training, and set up my own business about 2017, 18. And then the biggest change in my practice came through developing the wheel of consent into my sexological bodywork. So that's two pieces that kind of fit together and formed what I'm doing now, I guess.
I love it. And I know that we're going to talk more about the wheel of consent later as well. So I really look forward to hearing a little bit more about that. And how nice it is that you've just been able to, I guess, make a career out of something that you're so passionate about, and really feeling that sense of being able to help others, particularly in that pleasure space when I guess society still has so much taboo around pleasure. So I look forward to exploring that with you a little bit more as well. So
I just wanted to mention, I think actually the combination of my nursing background and then this new practice has really been kind of useful, because nursing taught me so much about meeting people where they are, working with people around their bodies, being able to work with people around consent. And so I've stopped working as a nurse only in the last year after 40 years, but I feel like my nursing is a part of my identity, feminist and queer-based nursing. Yeah, so sexological bodywork and wheel of consent has kind of enhanced and added to that, but they're kind of in fusion as well. So grateful for my nursing background.
lots of transferable skills there, definitely, I think, around that empathy and that caring nature, because you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing without those strong skills that you've taken from nursing. And as you said, that chance to explore and just get to know people and what their needs are at a deeper level as you do get through nursing too. So Abundant Body is the name of your business, and I just love it. I feel like the business name in and of itself is a really powerful statement for people searching out a sexological body worker. So when we have a look at the meaning of abundant, it means someone that has a plentiful supply of something that is valuable or desirable. where did the business name come from, and what's driving you in business? What does this abundant body mean to you?
I mean, the actual name came through kind of workshopping with some key friends, and then one friend in particular and I sat down and really found that language, found that title together. And it does mean abundance in terms of being aware of the abundance that we hold in our bodies already. It may not always feel like that. It's not a Pollyanna approach to the body. A lot of us struggle with our bodies and our body image, or where our bodies have genuinely let us down, or where we wish for something that we feel we don't have. So it's kind of an affirmation of what kind of environment I hope to offer to people, an environment of abundance, and also a recognition that your body and my body has a lot of abundance held within it already.
And is it exploring somebody, I suppose, to better understand that abundance and what that might look like, and to go, it is there, but sometimes it's about digging a little bit deeper to find it. Like, you might not subconsciously know that it's there.
Yeah, I mean, our bodies are what carries us around every day. Our physical form, we also relate our bodies to our spiritual, emotional, the other aspects of ourselves, our personality. We can express our personality through our bodies. So it's really just giving it really is just kind of offering up an affirming version of how we might be able to regard our own bodies. It's very tricky to try to, it's not useful to be saying to someone, you should love your body more, as if that's easy to do. So I'm really conscious of not presuming that people can feel or find that abundance immediately in their body, and it may never resonate for them. So in some ways it says more about me having my business name in that way, and saying this is where I'm coming from, and this is what I'm hoping to offer up, is a sense of abundance to explore.
Makes so much sense. It really is great. And I guess that uniqueness of the work that you're doing too. And as you said, that variation of feelings that people may have around their body, and that all of them are perfectly okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm really interested and curious to hear what a day of a sexological bodyworker might look like. Are you happy to share that with us?
Yeah, I am. I wrote some notes about this because it's actually useful to think about what an average day is, which does not exist. But kind of like, unfortunately, the first thing that came out was like, there's a lot of admin. I think anyone who works in private practice would know that there's a lot of time thinking about my work, thinking about what I could do, what I am doing, what I have done. There's time, actually managing the day-to-day stuff of running a business, the bookings and the payments and the descriptions, the promotion, which I'm fairly poor at. But those are some of the things that are involved. I spend time with people. If people contact me, I'm pretty open about having emails or texts with people before they decide to book in or not. So I do give a lot of my time, I guess, to trying to support people to decide if it's the right path to go. I have a free introductory call for people who want to have like a 20-minute Zoom. Then we can kind of see each other. They can suss out whether they feel like they'd like to work with me, and I can also assess whether what they're looking for is something that might be something I can help them with. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'll refer on. I guess it's also thinking about if there's themes coming through my work, could I run a group on that, or could I do a workshop around that? So I'm also thinking about that. If I'm seeing people online or in person, I wouldn't usually see more than, say, 4 people a day. It's probably more common for me to see 3 a day, and I don't do that every day of the week. I travel to Sydney to see people in person. So I see people in Newtown, and I can do online sessions as well, which surprisingly work better than I thought. But I think COVID delivered us with the opportunity to refine how we work online. And what that means is that I can see people from all different locations. And for some people, working online feels feels more comfortable or safer for them, and for other people, meeting in person feels more comfortable and kind of safer for them. So it gives choice. I also am part of connecting with communities of other similar practitioners, and I have peers and kind of people I admire across the world that I connect with, and also seeking supervision for my own practice as well. So there's lots of kind of behind the scenes work that goes along with this work.
Yeah, and I think that's true, like you said, of many businesses that, the party fun stuff up the front, but there's so much of the preparation that goes on behind the scenes. And I just love the way that you offer that sort of free 20-minute connection first session to be able to see, like you said, if they're the right fit, or sorry, if you're the right fit for them, and if this is the type of work that's actually going to help them with the concerns that they're presenting with. When you mentioned possible referrals, like what would that be to, like, psychologists or sexologists, or?
Sometimes it just might be that I'm not a good fit for them in terms of my identity or my approach or my style. So I'm not offended if people feel like they'd rather see somebody else in my field. But sometimes it could be that someone's looking for an erotic kind of experience that sounds more like sex work. So I'm happy to refer people or talk to them about whether a sex work booking might give them more of what they're looking for.
Mhm.
I can do erotic touch, and that's always in an educational framework. And if someone's looking for an experience of pleasure, two-way touch, a sexual experience, that might fit more with sex work. So that's quite a common conversation to have with people. And sometimes I also, it can be useful for me to know if someone is coming with effects of trauma, whether they also do have a talk therapist. And that is quite often a good combination for some people, to have a talk therapist to talk about how they're dealing with this in their day-to-day life, what the history of it is, what the meaning of it is, why has this happened. My territory is what's happening in your body right now today. What can we work with today that's happening in your body? So they're two different things. They're connected. But I do need to say to people, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a talk therapist, I'm a body worker.
And I love that distinction. And I guess because you did say that, so much of what you do can evolve around touch, how has that transformed into that online space?
Good question. I mean, it's quite possible to do online work, which is all my work moves at a slow pace, because it is about sitting with your body in its current state and noticing what is happening in your body. And if there's touch involved, it involves really slowing that down to be able to identify what touch you might want, to then trust that, and then to be able to ask for that, and then for the other person to go through the same process. Can I offer that? Yep, I can offer that. And then you move to the touch. So it's a slowed down process. All of that process can happen online except the actual touch. So if I was to ask someone now, how would you like me to touch you for a couple of minutes right now? They can actually slow down and really notice what their body calls for. So it might be, oh, will you hold my hands in my face in your hands? So they might ask for that touch, and I can reply, yes, I'm willing to do that. And that process can often evoke a sense of, that whole process of identifying and asking and waiting for the answer actually is quite a complete process without the touch even occurring. It's not the same as having the touch and being in the room. But a lot of people will be in the room and they still may not want the touch to happen. We might go through that kind of process and the touch doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that there's things that we can do online, which might be movement, shaking, making noise, like, having games across the screen, doing distance kind of exercises where you move back and I move forward. So there's things you can do that will evoke the feelings in your own body when the person's not in the room. And you can be coached on practices. So touching yourself, or even touching yourself on your own arm. If I say to someone, would you be interested to touch yourself on your arm? And they're like this, I might be like, what would it be like if that went really slowly? And what do you notice? And what do you notice when your hand comes off and goes back on? So that's very, that could be any part of the body. That could be masturbation coaching. That could be feeling parts of your body that you're kind of out of touch with, like your belly or your bottom, your butthole, your anus. Like you can coach and be in discussion around touch without the touch happening.
Sounds so creative, the way that you've come up with those ways to work online, and I really respect that change in modality. So you're working with people often, I guess, in their most raw and vulnerable states. And I dare say, as I mentioned before, with clients that may have experienced trauma or sexual violence as part of their history. What are some reasons as to why individuals or couples or even groups might come and seek out the work of yourself?
Mm-hmm. Most people come at a time when they want something to be different, or they want to feel something they haven't felt. So it's usually a time of wanting. There's some kind of wanting involved. So there might be wanting something not to happen anymore. So I don't want to get in relationships where this same dynamic happens over and over, where I don't get to ask for what I want and I just end up doing what the other person wants. I want to change that. Sometimes it's something so it could be relational, about relationships and who you choose and who you partner with. Other times it's about your own body. So maybe it's a transition in your life could be around menopause and experiencing your body differently. It could be post-surgery, which could be gender affirming surgery, or it could be surgery, other unrelated surgery that's not necessarily to do with sexual organs, but might be abdominal, or mobility kind of has changed. So sometimes it can be with wanting to reconnect with one's body in a new way, or wanting to honor a change in the body. Sometimes it's the actual problem. So I guess vaginismus is a medical term, not my favorite term. It's a word that really refers to where someone experiences pain with any kind of touch or insertion around the vagina, or the front hole. And it can also be around a sense of clamping or tightening, which is really painful, or it could be pain on the tissue. So that can be an acute problem or a chronic problem that someone comes with. So yeah, sometimes it's problems, sometimes it's wanting more, wanting better, wanting to not repeat old patterns. It's quite common for people to kind of say, I'm at a point where I don't know if I'm still a sexual being. Do I give up on myself, or do I give it one last go? That's not uncommon. Yeah.
And I find that really interesting too. And like you say, because people sort of cycle through these changes in their life and things happen for various reasons. And, sex isn't the positive experience for all that we would hope it would be, and, at different points. And so it is interesting that they're still exploring, like, is there still that hope that I can seek that pleasure and desire? And is it sometimes that people have these, I guess, sort of undiscovered or pleasures and desires that they haven't been able to have met before, and they sort of discuss that with you?
That's so true. So it might be about wanting to experience yourself differently. So maybe around sexuality, like maybe I'm interested in BDSM and I never have had that experience. Or maybe I'm interested in whether I'm actually bisexual or I'm poly, or, it could be those kind of questions. Maybe I'm limiting myself in who I have sex with. So it can be those kind of questions as well. Or maybe I'm newly single and I've never just had casual sex. I've always been in long-term relationships. How would I go about having casual sex, and what do I even like? How would I even ask for what I wanted?
Mm.
Yeah, that's so true.
Do you find that sometimes, I guess, you're validating or allowing people permission to explore that, because that's what they're sort of like being held back by?
Yeah, yeah, and people are naming it for themselves, so it's very brave. I am always quite astounded by the sort of courage of people to show up and say, I don't really know what you do, but I feel like you can help me with this thing and this is what I want. And I think that's incredible, because it is really, we're still dealing with a modality that is fairly not well known, and there's not a lot of places to go to really be able to. Sometimes a session might just be talking about the real nitty-gritty of sex and bodies, or it might be looking in the mirror at your own genitals, or looking in the mirror at your whole body. It might be talking about what kind of sex you really like, or what you've never really asked for, and what would that be like. So sometimes sessions can just be around having the freedom to talk, ask questions. I make myself available for questions. If people want to ask me stuff, I say, you can ask me anything. I will say if I don't want to answer something, but you can ask. So people might ask me about my sexuality, my path, or what kind of sex do I like, and I might not answer that, but they can ask. It's really important to have places to really ask.
It just gives me that perception of offering that really sort of safe and open place for somebody to explore some of these inner thoughts or feelings that they might be having. Yeah, I'm picturing a session. It's quite remarkable. And how about things like, I guess, bodily autonomy or sexual function? Are they sort of things that play into the role as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a starting place in the session might be to start with some movement or activities or breath. And I might sometimes ask questions like, oh, where are you feeling that in your body right now? And for some people, that's a pretty easy question. A lot of people, it's not. It's like, I don't even know what you mean. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Because a lot of people have experience of tending to their bodies when they're in pain or discomfort, or when they need medical care or something kind of practical. But to look for pleasure in the body can be challenging for some people. For others, it's like not. But to know that you have a body, and to know that your body is yours, is not as simple as it kind of sounds when you say it out loud. And for some people, their body is or has been very much the property of somebody else, or a relationship. It's been kind of the property of a relationship, or kind of a community, or a culture, or a family, or, a relationship. So exploring what it's like to really know your own body. It's okay to touch your own body. It's okay to look at your own body. Many people, particularly with vulvas, have not looked at their own vulva in a mirror, or if they have, it's a long time ago. So, I've asked people, do you think if I put up 20 pictures of vulvas on the wall and yours with one of them, could you pick yours out? And for some people, it's like, I don't know. Or your anus, like, who's looked at their anus lately with a mirror? Or who's touched their anus lately? So those kind of questions are really going to, do you get to look at yourself in the mirror full length? Do you take time with that? Or do you look at your face in the mirror each day? Some people don't want to. That's okay. I'm not trying to make them, but I'm asking the questions around what is your relationship with your body?
And I guess there's a real range of emotions that would sort of flow out from that too, yeah, like people's experiences of that.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I mean, for some people, it might be clear that that's uncomfortable, or it's just not interesting to them. but I think they're okay. They're questions that can be asked to try to open up a dialogue about how do you live in your body and how do you regard your body? What parts of your body do you feel actually you haven't really spent time being friends with?
It's an interesting way to put it. And so I guess these two notions of pleasure and curiosity are really playing into that work and become a strengths-based approach to the work that you're doing. How do you use that pleasure and curiosity to work with clients and get them to be exploring some of these things that they're presenting to you with?
Yeah. With pleasure, so often say if I asked you or someone, like, what do you notice in your body right now? Many people will go for, oh, actually my shoulder's a bit stiff, or I'm tired, or my feet hurt. They're all valid and they're real. And they also tell me what the problem parts of your body are, like where is, like, what hurts, what's not working, what do you not like? And then shifting that over to where is there something in your body where there's a sense of ease or comfort? Or is there a part of your body that feels pretty neutral right now? Where in your body do you feel drawn to in a pleasant or warm way? So it's shifting from a discussion about, it's shifting the focus around ease or pleasure, and then possibly being able to start there as a way to move through bodywork session. So that's a kind of pleasure approach, leading with pleasure, building on pleasure. There's parts of our body that react because they've had a history or an experience of fear or pain. So if somebody comes with something to do with fear or pain, I would be interested in knowing more about that and starting somewhere that's not with that part of the body immediately. Because, you know, if you're used to people bumping into your injured shoulder, which I keep saying because I had an injured shoulder for a long time, but if you get used to worrying that people are going to bump into your injured shoulder, when you're walking down the street, you're kind of guarding, you're moving away because you're constantly aware that that could be pain coming. And so if I go to see a practitioner and the first thing they do is reach for that shoulder, I'm going to be pulling away. So I'd be more interested in them working with my posture, my whole body. How does it feel in my shoulder that's not painful? What can I learn from that? How might we be working towards that? That could be the same with working with an anus or working with a vulva or vagina. Same principle. You're not the approach of trying to move towards that injured part or that sore part or that protected part, that would slow down, and we'd come from a place of curiosity, a place of choice. You choose when any touch happens, you choose when that touch stops. You choose how long that touch happens, and you choose when it comes off. So we're really developing developing in yourself a trust in what your body wants and needs, and then also it's a relationship with the practitioner, with me, which takes time to trust that I'm actually going to not do anything that you didn't ask for, and I'm not going to add anything, and I'm only going to do what you ask in the negotiation and agreement making.
It's so intertwined, and we talk about that move within society towards being more sex positive, and it's even to be more body positive is what you're sort of saying, the work that you're doing. So as we sort of touched on before, I guess the notions of pleasure may still be quite taboo or unexplored territory for some individuals. So it's great that they can work with you to uncover some of this. Is there anything else that you'd like to say just in terms of like the client's pleasure and what happens when you change some of that focus from those, I guess, the more negative aspects to more of those pleasurable aspects, what that sort of unlocks for them?
Yes, what I notice is when I slow down in my practice and I really truly stay at the pace where where we're negotiating that their body learns best, I notice how there's like a kind of drop in the room. There's a drop into it. It's easier to drop into your body when you can slow down. And the other piece of that is knowing that you have a choice in this space.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, like I'll also say, you can end this session at any time. You can leave at any time. This is not about having to endure and stay to the end. I will give a choice of like 2 or 3 places we could start today. So we could do this activity, we could do that, we could do this, and the person might choose one of those, or they might not like any of those. And it's like, okay, well, let's come up with some more things. So knowing you have a choice and then experiencing that is core in this work. And what was the other part of your question?
I guess just around, yeah, how pleasure can help them to kind of unlock some of those things that they might be presenting with. Yeah.
I would say choosing unlocks some of those things, and then pleasure is kind of like noticing sensations and touch that you like, or noticing feelings that you like, and then being able to build on those and trust that you actually have choice in those.
I like it. And flowing on from choice and trust just takes us so nicely into the work that you're doing around the wheel of consent. Would you like to take a moment to introduce that sort of concept and work to us a little bit more, and how that perhaps differs from consent models that other practices may be using?
As the wheel of consent is a practice, so it's not something you can just read about and then I've got it. It's a practice of actually experiencing embodied consent, so experiencing choice in your body. And I came across the wheel of consent through Sexological bodywork. It's introduced there in the course, and from there I went and did more training with Betty Martin, who's the creator of that work. And I'd only just set up my website and my business, and then I did the 5-day intensive course for practitioners, and then I was like, holy shit, I have to change everything. It just kind of reoriented how I wanted to work, and what I realized was important in my work around how I create agreements in session with people. And it is really all built around making agreements and choice. And really what Betty's work has done has really asked 2 questions in any exchange of touch and even non-touch, which is who is doing the thing and who is it for? When you go to see say a medical practitioner or a nurse, like I've been, you're usually going with you might be going with a problem. So I need to have a sexual health screen. The nurse says, okay, so here's what we need to do. And it kind of then turns into a treatment or a service model where I'm going to be like doing this test for you. It might be uncomfortable, try and make it as comfortable as possible. But it is like a transaction where it is for the person, but doesn't feel like it's for the person.
Mm.
And it can sometimes feel like it's for the practitioner. It's more for the practitioner, that they need to do this to get to the solution or the answer. So that can be a valid mode of seeing someone, but body work is more about you come to me and you have what you want. And how do we make sure that you stay in that place? If you have, it's trying to stop people from going along with stuff. And we're all really good at going along with stuff. So the wheel of consent is a practice where it breaks apart when you're giving and when you're receiving, and you get clear about who that is for. So I feel like I'm struggling to explain this in a useful way. It's a doing thing. Okay, so it's like if you picked up a book about yoga and you read the book about yoga, you can't do yoga, but you know more about it.
You have to see somebody like, yeah, role play that out for you
And
in
you have
front, or
to
like give
do
me an
it.
example. Yeah.
You do it, and you have to have help with it. So this is a modality where you learn to exercise your choice. and you learn to notice what's going on in your body through that process. And you actually also then to shed light on how many times we go along with stuff that we really don't want to be doing. Sometimes we have to because we need the cervix screening or we need the blood taking, but sometimes we don't have to, but we do anyway. So we might be having a massage and someone's digging into your muscles down your spine and you're like, this is too hard, this is really hurting, but you go along with it because you go, well, they must know best, they're the masseuse, they know what they're doing, I'll get through it won't be too long. We go along with stuff. So it's
people pleasing societies.
Yeah, it's trying to kind of tease apart those things.
So unique in its approach, but I guess also just a practice, as you say, and something that you need to be doing ongoing to better understand that concept, and really like the concept of it's not just who it's for, but who's giving as well. And that,
who's doing, which is different.
Giving. Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit about advocacy now, if that's okay. You're a huge ally and advocate across many spaces, as you've already mentioned, including but not limited to queer, feminist, and also people living with disability. Why are those ally roles important to you and the work that you're doing?
Work in pleasure and desire is still kind of a radical act. Like it's still, and working in sex and sex education or sex work or body work, erotic work, there's still pretty radical acts in our society. There's constantly threats to our ability to even talk about sex or eroticism or our bodies or our anatomy. Those things are still censored on lots of platforms. The laws around sex work generally are constantly under threat and being clawed back and then suppressed. So I can't work in this space and not know that I am part of that. I'm part of being able to challenge that, and I'm part of receiving some of the pressures upon that. Also, working with bodies can't be separated from how bodies get criminalized or marginalized. So it's important for me to be constantly learning about oppressions that may or may not affect me, but they affect all of us. So around racism, racialized bodies, around disability, discrimination, around stigma of certain people's being even allowed to have sex if they have to have, they have to rely on others to be granted permission for sex or not if they live in an aged care facility or if they have a disability and they have full-time carers or part-time carers. So there's so many areas where our bodies are regulated, stigmatized and marginalized, and they are not just individual, they're systemic. So it's really important for me to understand where I fit in those systems and when I might be actually contributing or colluding with those systems, and when I can act against them and highlight them and push back and educate myself. I mean, I think coming from feminist healthcare, kind of, in the 80s and 90s, that was really the personal is political was the cry then, and it still is. And I feel like the individualization of bodies is an enemy to bodies. We need to look at our collective bodies, how we relate to each other, which bodies get preferenced, which bodies don't. So I can't not hold those things in my work and my personal life.
Yeah, it is really powerful. And like you said, it's when you're having a look at the collective body, it's, look at the similarities as opposed to the difference. Yeah. And I think that's really powerful in and of itself too. So you have just touched on some of the barriers and the challenges that you face as a sexological body worker. And I know that in some of our discussions, there's a little bit more around that. Are you happy to talk to some of the challenges that you yourself and other sexological body workers face when trying to do this work and deliver it out into the community?
Yeah. I mean, one barrier is it's hard to understand what we do. So that could be something I could improve and all of us can improve. But I also think it's hard to understand the world of pleasure or bodywork or sex and pleasure, because it can often be seen as kind of a luxury, or it can be seen as something private, and stop talking about that. I don't want to talk about that. So the privatization of, of those things. There's also really practical things like on social media, for example, there's words that you'll get blocked or censored for. So even using the word sex can get you bumped off that platform for a period of time, or in some settings, if you're seen to be working in the sex industry, which is a broad word for what I do, I work in the sex industry, that can lead to you being deplatformed in terms of your payment systems or websites. A lot of our, with globalization, a lot of the conservative and aggressive laws of the US do filter into other countries and to our environments. So there's kind of those big systems and legal barriers, and then there's kind of the social awkwardness or stigma that can go along with this work. And I think, when you talk about, if I talk about sex or someone talks about sex and pleasure, there's also some conflicts around, well, if I talk about sex, am I implicating my lover, or am I implicating people in my friendship network? So there's still a lot of stigma about being free about sex and bodies. And sex education, Caddyshack's part of the effort to try to improve how we do sex ed and how we reach people. But there's still a lot of barriers to actually just being able to see other people's bodies in their diversity, or talk about anatomy in an erotic way or in a sexual way, or to talk about things like polyamory or BDSM, or, let alone just different ways you can have sex with anybody. Yeah, just a lot.
It is. It really is. There's plenty of work to still be done. Which I love. And I guess that's from yourself as a practitioner, but are there any sort of common themes around barriers or challenges that your clients or participants might have in terms of accessing yourself and the work?
Yeah, money. Because for someone like me, people can't get a rebate to see me, or someone like me. Some people can get funding through other sources. They can't get it through private health. NDIS will sometimes fund people to see me or people like me. But money is probably the biggest barrier. There's not a lot of us. It's a growing field, sexological bodywork, but in effect, there's not a lot of us. So there's not always a lot of choice. So if someone doesn't kind of think they gel with me, their choices might be a bit slim. I tend to see quite a lot of my clients come through queer community, people who know of me, some who might know me. And there can be barriers around being able to pay for something like this on top of all the other things, especially if you live in Sydney and you're renting, or you're low income, or you're on support income. Like it's hard to center this work as an essential or as a high choice. Which means that it can sometimes mean someone will come when things have got too bad for them, like I can't ignore this anymore, rather than it being something that you could see as a maintenance or a kind of choice that you make in the middle ground. So yeah, I'd say money is a lot of it.
Yeah.
And fear, it just feels scary. Lots of people contact and say, I've been thinking about coming to see you for a year and I've got the courage to come. Or it is a big step, and it's vulnerable. It's a vulnerable kind of step for a lot of people.
Absolutely. What a remarkable space for you to be working in, and just to feel that, you can be trusted for people to come and finally open up after such a long time. So great. Thanks, Stella.
And I guess for me, what the flip side of that is, it means that it's not easy to necessarily make a regular income in this work because of those barriers for other people. So the ebb and flow of the work for me means that it's an unpredictable kind of income. So you've got to love this work. And I'm not particularly entrepreneurial, and I prefer to just show that this is who you work with when you work with me, and for people to make that choice. But it's yeah, it's not an easy kind of way to make work if you're mindful of fee structure, mindful of generosity. I feel generous in my work.
You are very generous in your work, yes.
I like that. I don't want to let go of that. And I also want it to be sustainable. So, you know, I've been in salaried jobs for most of my life, so I'm newer at this. It's only been, say, 6 or 7 years in this field, and it actually trying to, you know, set up my practice in this field. So it's a new world, but I love it.
So good. And to me, that just reflects that you're as genuine, raw, and vulnerable as the participants that you're working with. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there is that sense of share, you know, it's a beautiful place to be, Stella, and we're so grateful for your time today. We are starting to draw to a close, and I would just like to ask if you feel that there's anything, like any sort of really strong points to get across or tips to get across to any of our participants online today, just in terms of advocating for your work and embracing the discussions that we've had today.
I mean, if I come from a position of wanting to offer up my work, it's like I'm really open to people contacting me and having those conversations before they decide whether to book or not. I do speaking requests. I run workshops. I also work with other organisations, with groups. I've worked with some people around neurodivergence, mental illness, disability, in terms of bringing some of this consent and embodiment work in. And I really feel I get surprised that when I step into some of the bigger organisations around this work, that the taboos around sex feel to me like the 80s all over again. And I feel astounded that we're still saying the same kind of things, like it's okay to look at your own genitals, it's okay to talk about sex, it's okay to have sex, it's okay to be supported to have sex if you live in a supported environment. And it's okay to know the proper names for your body parts, and it's okay to call your genitals whatever you want. All of those things, sexuality, I feel like we're kind of still clawing our way towards a more free concept of bodies and sex and relationships. And I want to be part of it. So, yeah.
Still so much to do.
I think we go through cycles, but I do, you know, like, you know, someone said to me the other day, oh, there's someone offering a workshop where you know, get in the circle and you put a mirror and you all look at your genitals. And it's like, that's fantastic, but it's not a new idea. That's been happening since the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, which is great. But the feeling that it's a new idea tells me that there's not a continuity. We're still going in these kind of cycles.
It's a really big reflection. And Stella, I just want to say thank you so much for such an enriching and enlightening session today. I know that our participants are dropping some information into the chat box to really resonate with that sentence too. So we thank you so much for your time with us on the couch today and for shedding some light on sexological bodywork and the work that you're doing. And we just, we thank you so much. And please keep educating around pleasure and curiosity and allowing permission for individuals to be able to explore that. So thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's joined us on the couch this afternoon. We have just popped up our QR code for our evaluation. We promise it's quick and easy, and we'd love to have your 5-star review. Thanks all from the Caddy Shack. Our next on the couch session is not now until June the 6th, when we'll be joined by Danielle, May, Kaplan and Egan Maggi as we discuss relationships and wellbeing from the angle of collective holding, mutual aid and community. So you can register online at Caddy Shack Project for that free webinar now, and we look forward to seeing you in June. Thank you so much, Stella.
Thanks for having me.